Hi everyone, welcome to this week's video. This week we are going to be talking about Salvia Viridis, also commonly known as annual Clary sage. It's a fantastic cut flower that you can grow in your gardens just to enjoy as a display or on a flower farm as a part of your cut flower offering to florists and for weddings and bouquets. We're going to talk through today the whole process from sowing those seeds, when I do it, right through to harvesting the flowers and using them in arrangements. So I hope you enjoy it. So this is one of my mini series looking at individual flowers and just following them the whole way through the process of me growing them from seed all the way through to flowering in the garden and then harvesting them. So if you're interested in finding out about any of the other flowers I grow, so far there's videos on Daucus, on Cosmos, and there's ones on cornflowers, on corncockles, on Arlea. So quite a few different ones that you can tap into on my channel. And you just need to go to the playlist that's called Mini Series and looking at individually growing flowers. So have a look at that if you'd like to find out more information about any of the others. And it's coming up as well to August soon, and we'll be getting into the part of the year where I grow cool flowers to try and overwinter them for earlier flowers next year. And there's 2 good videos on my channel about that as well. So if you're just starting to get thinking about doing that at this time of year, then do check them out as well. And I'll leave a link at the end of this video to one of the cool flower videos for you to check out if you would like to. So let's get started and have a look at Salvia Viridis. There's so many great reasons to grow this annual salvia, and one of the first reasons that I like to grow it here in Scotland in Zone 8B is because it's remarkably robust. It seems to manage to tolerate whatever the weather throws at us. So this year we had a very dry spell in June. We then have had a very, very wet July with very little sunshine, and yet it has been one of the best producers in my cut flower garden, and the flower petals have been unaffected by the constant rain that we've been having. So it's been very, very robust, great for a very changing climate. We're never very sure what kind of weather we're going to get from season to season, and salvia performs really well every season that I have grown it. So that is fantastic. So it makes a really excellent cut flower, both using it as fresh or dried in arrangements as well. It's fantastic at attracting bees and butterflies to your garden. They love the coloured bracts, and also it is really super easy to grow from seed. So we're going to talk about that next. So here we go, this is what our Salvia Viridis seeds look like, and as you can see next to the 5p piece there, they are a reasonable size to handle. They're not as small as snapdragon seeds, but they're not nearly as big as sunflowers, but still easy enough to space out on our tray. Now you can see here that I've got some from mole seeds that say Clary Monarch mixed on them, and this is still Salvia Viridis and annual sage, but you will see different names coming up for it. So annual Clary sage is one of the things that you might notice on your seed packets, but it is the same thing. So I often get seeds from Chiltern Seeds as well, and you can see from this picture that it is called Salvia Viridis Oxford Blue. So it really does depend on where you're getting your seeds from, what it's going to be called on the packet. But we've got some here in my hand, which I am going to spread out evenly onto my seed compost. This seed compost has filled a half seed tray, and it's been pre-soaked from underneath, so it's nice and damp but not waterlogged. And I'm just spacing them out as evenly as I can there so that they're not too crowded, making sure to label them. They're relatively small seeds, so I'm just going to give a very fine covering, about 3mm covering of vermiculite on top. So that means that it does allow some light through for germination. They're not completely buried. You can use a very fine covering of seed compost if you would prefer. I like to use vermiculite because I feel that it allows a little bit more light through, and also it maybe helps prevent damping off. The last thing to do once you have got your vermiculite on your rows of seeds and you've labelled them all up is to put the humidity dome over the top to create a nice atmosphere for germination and to place that seed tray onto the heated propagating bench. And we'll check back in a week, 10 days and see how these seeds are getting on, whether they've germinated. Salvia seeds like to germinate at temperatures of around 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. I start my salvia seedlings off in late February, early March every year, and then I'll do succession sowings of them every 2 to 3 weeks until we get to May. In late February and March, I will start them off on a heated propagating bench. When it gets to April time, early April, I will still sow them indoors in the greenhouse, but I won't use the heated propagating bench then. It will be warm enough for them to germinate without it. When we get to late April and May, the soil has warmed up enough outside here in Scotland that I can direct sow my next succession batches. And I'll do that in rows that are 30 centimetres apart, trying to space them out as evenly as I can down their rows so that I don't have to thin them too much to their final spacing. And that will just give me a good succession of flowers right the way through the season until September. So they should flower for you from about late May, early June, right the way through to September, the end of your season. If you want to know a little bit more about how I direct sow my seeds outside in the garden, I've got a video on direct sowing that you can have a look at on my channel. So outside germination can be a little bit slower for me, but inside on the heated propagating bench, I'm getting these salvia seedlings germinating within 7 days. Once you've got your salvia germinated, they do start to grow pretty rapidly, and you can see here in this seed tray that we've got the first pair of seed leaves, and then you can just see the true leaves, the first pair coming away there as well on the plants. And this is when you're at the stage that they need to start getting pricked out into their own cells. So I potted them on here into 82 cell trays, and that just gives them more room to grow individually for a few weeks. You could also pot them on into their individual 3-inch pots if you liked as well. So these are salvia that were sown from seed on the 7th of March this year, and this is what they were looking like once they've been potted on, and it was mid-April. So salvia are pretty robust, and you can start hardening them off fairly soon. Once they get to this seedling stage, you can start to put them outside the greenhouse in the daytime, bring them in the evenings, gradually increasing the length of time you're putting them out for every day until a couple of weeks has passed, and then you can get them outside. And they can go outside fairly early on in your season. They'll tolerate some light frost, and by April time, late April at least, the worst of the winter weather should normally be over by then. If you think a frost is forecast and you've planted them outside, then you can put some fleece over the top for the night just to protect them a little bit. So salvia will tolerate most soil types outside as long as it's well drained and not waterlogged. And they like a sunny spot, but actually they can tolerate some part shade as well, which can be useful if you've got a slightly more shady part of the garden that doesn't receive sun all day long. And you can space them out about 15 centimetres apart. Between 15 and 30 centimetres is absolutely fine. They grow to about 50 to 60 centimetres high, so actually I have found that I don't actually need to stake these or put my horizontal netting on. They're quite robust, and I find that I don't need to do this. I think if I was going to stake them at all, I would put them through some horizontal netting rather than individually staking. That would be easier with so many salvia plants in one area. But they've got pretty stiff stems, and because they don't grow that tall, they don't wave around in the wind and snap their stems like some of my other things like my Amimagus or my Cosmos would. You can pinch out this type of salvia. Make sure that it's got 3 to 4 sets of leaves on it before you do, and when you've pinched out that central part, make sure that you've left 1 to 2 pairs of leaves at least for the plant to grow. And if you pinch it out, it'll create a bushier plant with more flowering stems for you. So when it first starts to flower, you'll see that you start to just get these nice coloured bracts just at the very tips, and then this will extend down the plant as it matures, and the colour will deepen as well. And you can see here, look at that lovely bract at the top. It's got very vivid violet blue flowers on it with these lovely veins in them as well. And as the plant matures and it flowers, the stems will become stiffer and they'll be easier to work with flower arranging. So salvias are pretty low maintenance for me, and once you've got them planted out in the garden, as I said, that they are good in the wind. They don't really get bowled over with snapping stems at all, so support for me isn't required, and they don't need any feeding. You just need to water them in prolonged dry spells. So this summer I certainly haven't had to water them because we've just had so much rain. And they tend to be very pest and disease free as well. So a really great plant to have in your garden for this super colour that you can see here all summer long, and can look really nice in pots and containers as well. Because it doesn't grow that high, it is great for pots. So we've seen the absolutely gorgeous deep violet blue colour that you can get on this annual salvia, but you can also get annual salvias that are white, and you can also get them in pink as well. And these are really beautiful for mixing in with different themes in your flower arranging, or for just different colour schemes in your garden. And you can see this lovely vein marking on the pink ones here that you can see. Some of the packets come mixed, so you'll get white, pink and blues in together, and some of them you can buy separately, so it really just depends what you'd like to come up in your garden. So annual salvias are a really fantastic cut flower. They can last really well for you in a vase, and they don't need any special conditioning. As long as you've got a bucket of clean water, take it down to your garden or flower patch with you, cut when it's early in the morning or late in the evening, so not in the height of the sun, and get it snipped into your bucket with a few hours to condition, at least 3 or 4 I would say, and ideally overnight before arranging. So you can see some of the lovely salvia that's been going into my florist buckets in the last couple of weeks, and I just love that vivid violet blue colour. And here's just a little tip on using salvia when you come to get going with your flower arrangements. And you need to make sure that you strip all these little bits off that are going to be under the water line. So I'll just get my bucket here and show you. You just can pull down like that, and then they just all come off, and then you've just left with the flowers at the top, and then this will be your clear stem to go in the water. So we can cut that one to size, it's a little bit long, and then pop that in. Salvia is a good one for drying as well, it's long lasting. So there's a few extra bits there that I'm just going to tear off and put in my bucket. So I'm just going to pop a salvia down the front here, like that, and then I'll show you just now what that's looking like. So here you can see that lovely arrangement I was making there, and so many beautiful flowers to complement the salvia in there. You can see some annual phlox, nigella, daucus, buplerium there. And salvia really does go really well in my jar arrangements. It's a good height for jar arrangements, and if you cut it back you will get a second flush flowering in the garden. So they might be on shorter stems that are good for this size of arrangements, but those first big tall bracts that you're getting when it's very first coming out in the garden, they're great for bouquets as well. So here's some of that gorgeous violet blue salvia in a bouquet, and it's just, the colour is just so vivid. It's fantastic alongside those blue cornflowers and those pink cosmos. Really pretty. But these bouquets and my jam jar arrangements are always flowers and water. What about if you want to use salvia in a wedding bouquet? Well, yes, you can do that as well. It holds up really nicely. So you can see it here. This is a bouquet that was made for a wedding, and it's got some lovely cosmos and it's got some scabious in there. And here you can see some of this lovely violet blue salvia again down there at the bottom. So lasts really nicely and just gives such a lovely colour in a bridal bouquet.
and it works really well with pinks and whites and greens. And you can use it in flower girl posies like these, where you want lots of colour. You can see the salvia just there down on the right at the bottom, and some there on the left as well. So you can see that I'm mixing it with all sorts of summer flowers, from those different colour cosmos to the cornflowers, to the scabious, to the sweet peas. And these jar arrangements to go on tables for weddings, they're just full of scent from the herbs, the mint, the sweet peas, and those salvia just look absolutely fantastic as well. So I really recommend growing this annual Clary sage, and here is a summary of what we've talked about so far. So you'll find today that I've kind of been going between the two. I've been calling it Clary sage and I've been calling it Salvia Viridis, and they're both the same kind of flower, so you might come across a few different examples of what they're called. But this is the annual variety of salvia, and you obviously get your perennial varieties as well that you can grow in your gardens. It's really easy to grow from seed. You can start sowing it at the very end of the winter, beginning of spring, so end of February, beginning of March, and you can keep succession sowing it every few weeks right through till May. And that means that you'll get flowers right from the end of May, beginning of June, right through until September. You need to keep succession sowing it to get those flowers all summer long. So if you just sow it once, you'll just get flowers for the start of the summer, but not for the end and into the autumn. Its final height is about 50 to 60 centimetres, so it's not the tallest flower in my flower patch, but it does give really nice long stems to begin with for flower arranging, and then succession flushes after that will give you some nice shorter ones for lower arrangements. And it can be spaced about 30 centimetres between rows, and then between 15 to 30 centimetres when you're thinning out between plants. It tolerates lots of different soils, whether it's sandy or clay soil you've got, as long as it's well draining. And it likes sun, but you can actually grow it in partial shade as well. You don't need to feed these types of salvia. If you did feed them, it might mean that your flower production was actually reduced, so definitely no need to feed. And just water as required. So if it's a really dry spell in the garden in the summertime, then give it a good water a few times a week. And especially if you're growing them in containers as well, just make sure that the soil is not drying out there. You can pinch them out when they have got a few sets of their true leaves, so that you'll get a bushier plant with more flowering stems on it. You can provide support if you want, and I would be doing this with horizontal netting if I thought it was required. But because they only grow to 50 centimetres, 60 centimetres tall, I find that actually they're quite strong, robust plants, and they withstand wind quite well. So I find that I don't need to stake them. But you'll depend where you are and where your garden or flower farm is situated if you feel that you need to do this. When you're cutting the flowers, cut quite deep into the plant so that you're going to get longer stems coming back again for successive flowers. Condition them in water for several hours or overnight, and you'll get a good vase life of approximately a week. And remember that you can dry these flowers as well. So when the stems are quite mature, feeling quite stiff, you can harvest the flowers, hang them upside down to dry for a few weeks, and they will be an excellent cut flower dried for arrangements in the autumn-winter time. Remember that if you don't cut back the stems after flowering, this is something that will produce seeds, and these will be dispersed over your garden, and you'll get little salvia seedlings coming up the following year.
So thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you liked finding out about this annual flower that I love to grow. And if you don't grow it already, maybe it's given you some inspiration to try it next year. And maybe if you are growing it, it's given you some tips on maybe the harvesting or maybe the growing side of it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you are enjoying watching my videos on my channel, please do like and subscribe. It's fantastic to have you following along. And please do leave any questions that you have in the comments section, and I will get back to you as soon as I can with any information I can share with you about how I grow my flowers. Next week, we're going to be having a look at using some of the salvia in a flower arrangement. So you might have seen a little bit earlier in the video where I was showing you just about stripping the stems when you are going to be putting them into your vase of flowers. Well, you can watch the whole of the process of putting that particular arrangement together along with another one of a different kind of colour scheme next week. So I'll look forward to showing you that then.